Hello, I'm Ann Del Castillo, Commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Industry Forum at the New York International Children's Film Festival. We at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment are proud to be a founding partner of this important event. Our agency is charged with supporting New York City's creative economy: film, television, theater, music, advertising, publishing, digital content, and nightlife. Our Office of Film, Theater, and Broadcasting provides support for on-location filming throughout New York City. NYC Media operates the largest municipal broadcast television and radio network in the country. And our Office of Nightlife works to support a thriving nighttime industry which has given birth to so many of our most influential cultural movements. Through our programs and initiatives, we support industry and workforce development in order to ensure access and opportunities for a diverse talent pool. Together, these sectors represent over $150 billion in economic output annually and over 500,000 jobs for New Yorkers. But more than that, they define New York City as a global creative capital. As someone who started at Sesame Street, children's programming is particularly important to me. But also, as an only child of a single immigrant mother, I experienced the power of children's media. My mother likes to joke that Sesame Street was my babysitter, but really what was important was that I saw my experience as an urban American of immigrant heritage reflected in programs like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, and Electric Company. So I thank the New York International Children's Film Festival for their vision and commitment in presenting this forum. And I thank all of you for being here and engaging in these important conversations. So with that, I now turn it over so that you can begin our program.
Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Maria Cristina Villaseñor. I'm the Programming Director of the New York International Children's Film Festival. I'm so excited that you all are here joining us for this amazing panel today. Today's panel is A Solid Foundation, Funding Kids Media as a Key Investment in Inclusion. And we have an exciting and esteemed group of panelists joining us. Today's talk wraps up NYICFF's Industry Forum series towards an inclusive future. It's a key part of our nonprofit mission to support a more diverse, more intelligent, more artful film culture for kids, and really reaching out to those makers out there, to those aspiring to get into the industry, to those in the nonprofit and media community, to really join together and join forces to realize this important part of our nonprofit mission, but I think a core goal for so many of us out there. It's been a fantastic series. We want to give a huge thanks to all who've made it possible, and especially enormous thanks to our founding forum partner, the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and especially to Commissioner Ann Del Castillo, who you saw at the top, and also a very special thanks to Unifrance, who's been with us throughout the run of this series, and of course, it's been a wonderful support of the festival, so thank you, Unifrance, as well. We invite you throughout this forum. A big goal of it has been to foster community. So we invite you to connect through the chat, of course. Also make sure as we're talking with our individual wonderful panelists to be thinking about your questions, and you can drop them into the question function, and we'll make sure to bring everybody back together and field your questions to them. So if you have burning questions, make sure to share them and drop them in, and don't be shy. And also in the chat, we're going to be sharing a means for you all to connect. If you've been with us in the series, you know we have a thriving, wonderful Google Sheet that is, it is a publicly accessible document, so anything you share in there is public, but it's a great way for folks to connect, to share a little bit about themselves, their CVs, their portfolios, whatever you want to do, but just, you know, have a means of of getting a sense of who's out in the community and how you might connect. And we've had a really great international audience. So thank you, all of you folks from around the world that are turning in and across the US as well. Okay, let's see. I think that's all I have to do in terms of our little business here, but I am very excited now to introduce our fantastic participants and welcome them all. So you see everyone here. Welcome, everybody. And first off, I'm going to start with Marie Jamora. Hey, Marie, it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's fantastic. So I'm going to share with you all a little bit about Marie's very impressive career to date, and there's lots more to come. Marie Jamora is the founder of Cinema Sala and the production company Indie Pop Films. Her short film Flip the Record, which was presented in NYICFF's Girls POV program in NYICFF in 2018, won the Grand Jury Award for Best Narrative Short at Urban World, and her first feature film, What Isn't There, premiered at Slam Dance Film Festival. After about 2 decades of filmmaking and teaching in the Philippines, she's become the first Filipino director accepted into WB's Television Directors Workshop, which is fantastic. And she's on the directing faculty at the American Film Institute and recently directed an episode of Queen Sugar. And we are really excited as well, and on top of all of that, to hear about her new kids media projects that she has in development in Indie Pop Films. So we're excited to hear from you later, Marie. All right, next up we have Dr. Yalda T. Uhls. Welcome, Yalda.
Thank you. It took me a minute. I'll be quicker next time.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we're going to give you that extra, LA, New York connection. So you have a vibe. But Yalda runs an amazing nonprofit institute called the Center for Storytellers. Dr. Yalda T. Uhls is a research scientist at UCLA, and she founded the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. She has over 15 years of senior executive experience in the entertainment industry at studios including MGM and Sony. Her expertise of how media content is created, as well as the science of how media affects children, informs her unique perspective. And we're really excited to hear directly from you, Yalda, about that very impressive and very interesting and important range of research that you do at CSS. So welcome. And finally, we are excited to have a twofer representing the wonderful New York City-based The Animation Project. So we welcome Nala Turner and Masuma Begum. Welcome, Nala and Masuma.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, happy to be here.
Fantastic. We're so excited to have you, and it's nice to have someone at NYICFF in our backyard in terms of New York City joining us. But it's a really great project that can, just model so many great things, I think, for everyone out there. So to tell you first about Nala C. Turner is a lead creative arts therapist and clinical program associate at the Animation Project, a ceramics artist and the founder of Carlene Ceramics. Through clay work, she advocates for the dismantling of barriers related to race, cultural identity, and femininity, working to foster positive connections and more creative spaces for people of color. So great to have you here, Nala. And joining her, very exciting, is an intern in the project. Masuma Begum is a queer DESI recent graduate who is an aspiring 3D game artist with a BFA in animation and a minor in film. She's currently an intern, as I said, for the Animation Project's virtual intensive training internship, and she hopes to promote and uplift marginalized identities, not only within the animation and gaming workspace, but also within the media itself. So great to have you as an emerging voice, Masuma. All right. So just to give you a little more sense of the way the panel will roll, we are going to be talking sequentially with everybody, and then, as I said, bringing everyone back to answer your questions. And we're really focusing today on looking at the many ways and means that support for diverse, independent filmmaking and youth media projects can come about and how they can really offer exponential returns. And there are a number of different strategies that the folks here have all gathered together in different ways of looking at this, so that we hope that you can really take away, your own means of crafting, the necessary support that it takes to do this important work. And we know that that is a huge job in itself, right? But just in case you're thinking that this is a dry panel on numbers, we are excited to prove you wrong with this wonderful look that we're going to kick it off with at Marie Jamora's NYICFF audience-loving film, Flip the Record, just to set the stage and sort of prime us for, why we're all here to support great work. So here's the clip. Vincent, if you could share that with us, please.
The Bay Area's new dimension in entertainment, totally tubular.
Can I go to the showcase?
No.
Marie, how does it feel looking back on that now? So fun.
It is fun. I haven't seen that trailer in years. And I was like, oh, that's fun. I think the song, and I just love that cast. It just brought back really great memories.
Yeah, I mean, just your lead. And, just to kick it off, it's a story, about Filipino representation. It's a story about, a girl sort of struggling against stereotypes, gender stereotype-based stereotypes. And I just would like to kick it off by asking, how did that story come about for you? Was it something that was grounded in what you saw or didn't see in terms of representation? And tell us about the inspiration in getting it made.
That's a great question. So I actually moved here from the Philippines 8 years ago, and it was surprising to me not seeing Filipinos in mainstream media, even though I have so much family here, and I knew that our community is a huge community. And so one thing I also noticed when I moved here was that even though I was a director in the Philippines, I was not getting opportunity to direct here. I had to take other jobs. And so when HBO's Asia Pacific American Visionaries competition came about, the first one, my husband and I were like, let's make a short and submit to it. Because it was one of the opportunities for Asian stories, and people were actively looking for it. So we galvanized, we wrote the short, produced it, and did post in 3 weeks. And we self-financed it. We shot for 2 days, and we spent our savings of $4,000 on it. And the story came about because in the Philippines, I'm a musician. I'm in a rock band. But when I moved to America, all the Filipino Americans I knew, someone was either a DJ or they knew someone who was a DJ.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering why that was. I was like, that's so unique. And then with a little bit more digging, I realized that it stemmed mostly from this one scene in the Bay Area in the 80s and 90s where all these turntablists came from. And me and my husband actually started to make a documentary about it. It's still unfinished. We're still making it. But we interviewed a lot of people in the community and started gathering stories. And I used some of these stories along with my own upbringing, because my brother was a DJ in Manila, and made the story of Flip the Record. And then, just one last bit about it is that, it really paid off to, self-finance and take a risk on myself, because that's what really opened up all the opportunity to direct here in America. And at the same time, even though we spent $4,000 on the film and then $1,000 in submitting to film festivals, we ended up winning at Urban World a cash prize of $5,000. So we made our money back. So it was kind of amazing how the universe kind of just paid us back for it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And, that level of exposure and connections, I would imagine too, like, even if it wasn't immediate, returns.
And also, I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted
please.
to add that, even though we, 4,000 is not a lot of money, but we really just pulled every favor we knew with all our friends in LA. We shot in my uncle's house, which is a time capsule for the 80s. I looked at the house, I was like, this is a place where we can shoot. And then, our actors, I found them on Facebook. I put out a call on Facebook. It was really kind of a grassroots kind of filmmaking experience. And then some of our actors, one came from New York and one came from San Jose, and I couldn't afford to pay them. And I just said, I love you, you're my favorite for the role. And if you could be in LA on this date, the role is yours. And since there weren't many stories being made about Filipinos, I mean, they ended up, their parents paid for it, or they spent their savings, they took a bus, they ended up in LA, and we ended up shooting with them.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and that kind of leads to my next question and your next initiative, about kind of delving into the Filipino community and really wanting this to be something that was starting to tell, your stories. A segue into telling us about Cinema Sala and how, your practice goes beyond just filmmaking, but really galvanizing a community. So tell us about Cinema Sala and how that got started and some of the funding around that.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, Cinema Sala happened in the same year we shot Flip the Record. I just realized it also in 5 years ago, 2016. I realized that in Manila, we have a very tight filmmaking community. Everyone was sharing what stories we were making. We would show each other our films, and then we would all support each other. And when I moved to LA, I didn't have any of that. I could maybe the Filipino filmmakers I knew what could fit in one hand. So I wanted to change that. So I started inviting people, either who I knew or friends of friends, to show their work in my living room. Sala means
so your
living
sala,
room. Yeah, my sala.
Nice.
And we would show their work. We'd have a Q&A. We'd have a potluck, and we started doing that for a year, to the point that the neighbors started complaining because we couldn't pack more people into our living room. And so luckily, Francis Culado of Visual Communications, they do the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. They saw the work that we were doing, and they were like, why don't you use our sala, like our office, so you have more space? So me and my husband, we moved there. We got to expand to a bigger audience, and we have housed it there until the pandemic, for the next 4 years. And that from then, I think I would have to say that in 5 years, we've had more than around 37 events, and we've screened over 120 films. And then our audience, because of the pandemic, has also grown to a global audience, and more than 2,000 people from all over, Filipinos from all over the world now.
Fantastic, yeah. And then I saw that you also got some support from Array around that, and I'm wondering how that led to other opportunities as well.
Yeah, that I think led us to a different, leveled up our work with the community, because in 2019, Array reached out to various members of the Filipinx community. They wanted help programming a Filipino film fiesta that they were having on their campus. And Mercedes Cooper, the head of programming at the time, she saw the work that I was doing, and we had a couple of conversations. And she said to me that, Array does a lot of work with high school students, teaching them about film. And they noticed that, the Chinese American kids knew the Chinese directors and the Black kids knew the Black directors, but the Filipino American kids knew nothing about Philippine cinema. And we have had over 100 years of cinema. Our cinema is very old, and we produce a lot of films, but our archival and our distribution is kind of lacking in the Philippines, and so it hasn't crossed over. And luckily, we hit it off, and I ended up co-programming with her this event. And aside from doing that, they saw that the event was one of the top events of the year for them. They saw that there was a real thirst and desire for this content from our community, and they invited us to they had something called the Array Summit, where they chose around 14 film festivals and film organizations who work with various communities all over America. And they were giving us tools in order to expand, which included a grant. And so they really, for me, we were out to the other organizations, we all said that once Array invited us, we felt seen. We thought that we were doing small things, but we didn't realize that we were kind of undermining our own work with our own communities. And they helped us think bigger, and they helped us with a grant, which helped us get people to make our organization more sustainable, because it was just me and my husband. And because Array gave us a grant, we got to expand to a bigger team.
Yeah, building that capacity, which kind of leads to my next question about you really harness the power of all of these different funding opportunities and partners and working in different ways to support the media. How do you think the best way is for filmmakers out there to really work with organizations and sort of take a note out of your book of making it work in terms of paying attention to what the opportunities that are out there and leveraging for them for the next one?
That's a really great question.
I know,
Something
a big
that took
one. I was
me
asked
years.
2 big questions.
I think that organizations can really sense passion, and they can sense where there is a lack, a need, and so they could see, if this makes sense, but like I think we see that people are doing it for virtually nothing. They're doing it out of love and out of pocket. That's when they realize, like, oh, they're not doing it for any gain. They're not, and that's when they realize that, okay, if we don't help them sustain it, this might go away, because there's only so long that you can go out of pocket. And I think having that authenticity, filling a need that doesn't exist, doing work that no one else is doing, they can see all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, but aside that, you also need to know how to phrase the work that you're doing in order to apply for a grant. Because right now for Cinema Sala, so for us to sustain ourselves, we have to apply for grants every year, because the grant you get is just for a year, and you have to apply for a different grant.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding a way how to kind of articulate that passion that you have for the community, the work that you're doing, and also making sure that you're taking note of all the things that you're doing, so you can prove to them, because a lot of organizations want to see kind of numbers, they want to see the statistics and things like that, because that helps them put a number on the funding that needs to happen and equate that to the work that you're doing. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really helpful for our audience. And then I want to wrap this up before we get to our bigger questions by asking you about the kid portion of this, of course, because I think it was really interesting, because I think when I came to you and was really, really excited I remember offering you the platform for Flip the Record at NYICFF, and I was a little worried because obviously you could see in that clip, it's for slightly older young audiences, but you'd said that it was the first time that it had really been programmed for younger audiences. So just thinking about, how that does have an impact, and wanting to hear about what you have in development for now for indie pop films, I'd love to just ask, A, what you got, but B, really like your ethos and what do you think it's important to create and share for young audiences?
I really have to hand it to NYICFF, because as you said, we didn't think it was a film for young audiences necessarily. I mean, it's a coming of age film. It should be actually quite apparent to us, but we just thought it was an interesting cultural phenomenon that happened to these high school students, and we didn't frame it in terms of, I guess the audiences. And one more, we also only saw how much it resonated with young audiences when we screened at San Diego Asian Film Festival, because they actually had a film week where they showed it to middle schoolers and grade schoolers. And it made me realize that that's the audience I'm most afraid of, because they're the ones that can see through everything. And if they don't like it, they don't like it.
Yeah.
And so I was in the back just watching this room full, like a 1,000-person capacity movie theater with kids. And I was just looking and just like biting my nails. And then the kids were like yelling at the screen, like, that's fire. And then they were just kind of interacting with it. And it was quite wonderful. And so that made us, I think, realize the possibilities with a young audience. And so with indie pop films right now, like we're an Asian American company that focuses specifically on Filipinx culture. And so for example, I'm right now in an animation studio called Apartment D in Burbank, California, because right now we're in the middle of production of a music video for a Filipino rock band. And it's a stop motion music video featuring Filipino characters, which has never happened before. Fantastic. Because and stop motion is not a really big industry in the Philippines is actually quite so. Introducing this beautiful art form to the Filipino audience, and at the same time having Filipino characters is going to be, for me, it's historic because I started my career as a music video director. I've made over 50 music videos. And for the first time, I feel like I'm making something very, very new. And I can't wait to share it. So that's something we're doing right now, one of the things. And another thing is that I am a recent mom and I have a 2-year-old baby. And having a half Asian child, you get to see all the edutainment that's out there. And I watched Sesame Street myself and Mr. Rogers, but right now there's something that I want from children's programming that I'm not getting for my daughter, and how I want her to see herself. And so we're developing that, especially since my husband's a stop motion animator, and so we're making Asian American content for preschoolers. And we're also having like a TV show, and then another TV show for preteens 6 to 11 about reading, because we want to just go away from screens and kind of encourage almost like a reading rainbow, but for kids now, and also using the body. And so that's sort of some of the things that we're working on right now, and we're about to pitch those.
Very exciting. Yeah, it's great to see that back and forth kind of fueling of different media and media literacy and representation. So that's really exciting. We're excited for you to come back with some of that content hopefully soon.
We are definitely going to submit all of our things to your festival.
Great. Well, fantastic, Marie. Thank you for your time, and we'll have you back because I'm sure people have lots of questions to ask you. So thanks. And next up, we are going to have Dr. Yalda T. Uhls joining us from the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. So welcome back, Yalda. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yalda, you have created, obviously you have an impressive career within media and the research sciences, but I'd really love to hear about sort of the impetus for creating the Center for Scholars and Storytellers and how you kind of developed this innovative kind of industry, academic partnership, and how you decide on the areas of focus in terms of kids media.
Yeah. So, I mean, you heard my background. I was a movie exec for 15 years and, really learned storytelling, worked with writers, directors, in fact, hired my husband, who was a screenwriter when I was an MGM exec. And then I got my PhD later in life. I decided I was done with the movie business, ready to try something else, and got this but studied how media impacted kids. And like Marie, I was a mom and very interested in kids all of a sudden. Sure. And so as I graduated, I wrote a parenting book. It's my interests have always fueled what I do. And I realized that this background that I have, 15 years in the movie industry, 10 years as an academic scientist, I understand both those worlds really well. And I realized, industry people, and people look at industry people, I was a senior vice president at a major studio. That's like, people think those people are, oh, you're only about the money. But I was always about changing the world. I was always about inspiring people. And, but I had to make money and focus on my company's goals. But if someone could help me know how to do good for my audience in a way that fit with my life, I would have done it in a heartbeat. So I knew there were people out there. There's lots of amazing people that want to, they want their content to change the world. And so I thought if I could bring these groups together, there's shared values. There's shared values of how we can positively impact people. And diversity, equity, and inclusion was just a natural. I've always cared about that. I'm a daughter of Persian immigrants. So, my first movie was Mi Familia, My Family, which is about Mexican-American immigrants. And I,
yeah.
That movie is, and it's because I'm a child of immigrants that, and the executive producer was Francis Ford Coppola, another child of immigrants, so, those stories are universal. And so I've always cared about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it was a natural. And since George Floyd, the industry, it's completely changed and cares about this so much. And mental health is just an issue that's really important. We focus on tweens, teens, and young adults because there's so many people and researchers in the preschool area, and it's sort of a standard in that area to consider the needs of the child and educational stuff. But, as Marie said, there's not stuff out there for tweens, teens, tweens there is a little bit, but not for teens and young adults. So that's where we think we can have the most impact.
Fantastic. Yeah, I absolutely think that's the case, and that's great to hear. So you have done a couple of reports that I think are particularly germane to what we're talking about here in terms of the potential impact of underfunding on the box office in terms of diverse storytelling and filmmaking. So tell us a little bit, if you would, walk us through those things.
So, having been in the business, I do know that, money talks. And if you can appeal to the business interests of the entertainment industry and can convince them that diversity is good for business, that's your best bet at making impact. So we decided to do some research and see if we could find that there was a cost when people do not create content that feels authentically diverse and inclusive. And that's more than just someone behind the camera, in front of the camera being diverse. It's really just the storytelling, really having something that rings true to the culture it's trying to portray. Does that, if you have stories that don't do that well, will you lose money at the box office? And we found, in fact, in our authentically inclusive representation report, free on our website, all our research reports, we call it the AIR report. We found that there was a cost of $32 million at the box office for large budget movies if they were not authentically inclusive representation. And then after that, McKinsey did a report where they found that the industry was leaving $10 billion on the table by not creating content for Black audiences and using Black creators. And we just released a report for Stars Entertainment where we did a nationwide survey, over 1,000 people, and asked them, do they care about multicultural content? And we found that the audience actually pays attention to not only diversity in front of the camera, but at this point, audiences are making content choices based on who's behind the camera. And that's new, that's never happened before, they're actually paying attention, and that could be a marketing hook, so Stars actually already advertises and creates little marketing pieces on their writers and directors, who are usually women and people of color. And it turns out that's probably a smart business move because people are paying attention to that.
Yeah, the level of audience awareness is really, it's wonderful to sort of see that there's a groundswell now, really, demanding this and, showing it with their, I was going to say tickets, hopefully tickets soon, but, their subscriptions and what have you. So is there an aspect of this, obviously I think it's really powerful and hopefully game-changing for the decision makers within industry. Do you have any thoughts or advice for how aspiring creators out there might sort of arm themselves with this data to position, themselves and think about how they get themselves out there and their work made?
Yeah, I think the data and the research that we did really supports this business case. And and especially if you have like a niche audience, if you have something that that audience will understand and love that piece of content, and you can say that that audience is X percentage of the movie going audience, you can then define a marketplace. And if your piece of content costs relative, I also have an MBA. So from a business perspective, if you can say the cost is X and the revenue potential is Y, because you know how to market to that audience. Hidden Figures, for example, they partnered with a lot of NGOs and a lot of Black advocacy organizations, and they were able to market through churches and different things very specifically to that audience. And it built a huge audience, for a movie that, Black women, period piece, kudos to Fox for greenlighting it, but that is a hard thing to greenlight. And So if you have a partner that understands your audience, that you could say they're willing to go out and put it on their email list or ask people to watch it. Another great group is, I forgot what it's called, Golden Dragon or something like that. It started around the Oscars when they said hashtag Oscars so white. And there was there was a perception there was an Asian bias in the presenters were saying things, and there wasn't enough Asian content. And when Crazy Rich Asians came out, this advocacy group asked people in the community to buy out entire theaters. So opening weekend, that movie did really well, and then it had legs. So like, if you can think about that, I think, and you have that kind of partnership up front, that could be a really good selling point, especially if your budget isn't particularly high. People are willing to take a chance. And the one other thing I would say is, like, we have now been hired to do these impact workshops, working directly with content creators from major studios. So Walt Disney hired us to talk about diversity and inequality and how to portray it in children's media. And now other studios are hiring us as well, so that content creators really understand how to developmentally do it in a way that's appropriate and talk about these issues for that age group, whatever age group. But the fact that the industry is actually hiring an organization like ours to talk directly to their content creators, that's a model that never would have happened when I was in the industry.
Amazing. That's so fascinating. I'm sure we could dig into that, and I definitely want to ask you about that in more depth, because I think that's really interesting to really mindfully go into how you craft that representation, and have a kind of mirrors and windows view for audiences of that, right? And great takeaways for our audience, certainly. So thank you so much, Yalda. We are going to be welcoming you back and fielding questions to you. So I really appreciate it, and excited for everybody to check out the Center for Scholars and Storytellers website and all the great resources on there. So thanks, Yalda. All right, next up, I'm excited to welcome back from the Animation Project, Nala and Masuma. So welcome, Nala and Masuma.
Hi, thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
Fantastic.
Hello.
Hey, Masuma. So Nala, I'm going to start with you as the lead creative arts therapist at the Animation Project. I'd love for you to just share with everyone. I have a little bit of a sense of it, but I'm excited to learn even more about your own practice at the Animation Project, and also how that converges with the other sort of artistic and cultural work or practices that you do. But tell us how you first got involved with the Animation Project, and a little bit about its ethos, its goals, what it does, and why that appealed to you, and how you all made it happen.
Absolutely. I first got involved in the Animation Project almost 2 years ago as a graduate level creative arts therapy intern. I was finishing my master's and doing my clinical training. And so I had the opportunity to come into TAP as an art therapist, as a ceramicist, and as the only person of color within the clinician sector of TAP. And so holding both the role of being a clinician and an artist, I've always been sort of interested in exploring that space between them, that idea of what does it mean to be an artist, what does it mean to be a clinician, and how can you bring those two together? And so bringing those two roles together into a collective identity always was something that was really important to me. In my undergrad, I received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Studio Art with a concentration in ceramics, and then I received a Bachelor of Arts in psychology as well. So I had the intention of forming a dual self from the get-go, and really wanted to tailor both of my loves, art and social/emotional well-being. I think art is very healing, and I think it's really accessible. And so I thought, how can I make that happen? And previously up to that, I really hadn't had that many experiences that was allowing me to do so. I had worked and did my clinical training in inpatient psychiatry in a hospital setting. And so I was more interested in working in spaces that fostered more of a community-based setting. And so I really liked that the Animation Project in particular tailored its lens to serve youth and young adults of color in particular. And so I chose TAP. And TAP is a nonprofit therapeutic workforce development program. And we sort of provide youth both therapeutic and technical training when it comes to animation, so that they can pursue careers in the animation industry and in that media field. I think as an organization, it really does value the influence of well-being within professional growth and progression. in working fields. And so I think with specifically choosing populations that are underserved, yet really rich in creative power, that mission in itself really aligned with the work that I was doing. And so I think when thinking about opportunity and equity and access, all the work that I do, whether it be as a ceramics artist or a creative arts therapist, is always really looking at how is it that I can combat systemic and racial inequities that plague our society in multitudes of ways, right? And actually allow myself to sort of break down those barriers that feel like barriers. Because when I was a kid, I never could have imagined to be something like an art therapist at all, like not even sort of kind of. And so for me, it's always important to be able to show and be a representation for people to see that there is access and there are ways for you to have a sustainable job and have fun at your job. So the mission really aligned with my work. And I thought that, whatever I was going to be doing, it although it wasn't clay, at TAP, it introduced a space for me to sort of learn about animation, something I had never done before, but as a 3D artist, something that I could grasp a little bit and give me a technical skill that was valuable, but also challenge the ways in which we implement and facilitate storytelling. For me as an artist, storytelling is huge. And so I was sort of able to use it and sculpt counter narratives that I hadn't done before in a way that I hadn't done before. And so I think I took the little bit of background that I have working in nonprofit for housing and employment and healthcare in St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I'm originally from. And working at the Whitney Museum. I used to work at the Whitney Museum specifically as an art educator, working at a nonprofit ceramic studio, Art Shack Brooklyn, things like that. I was able to sort of piecemeal those things together, and TAP just felt like the one place where I was able to take all of those roles and be that one person in one space, which I think is really powerful, because as a person of color, as a Black woman, so often the idea of code switching and holding multiple roles in mask is something that you're always dealing with. So whenever I can be my full self in one space, I really like that. And I thought TAP was different in that way. It allowed me to be both at the same time. So integrating, licensed creative arts therapists and animators in the room is really what makes TAP really cool. To me, it allows us to sort of support the youth to learn the skills, but also cultivate their personal and professional selves and connect to jobs in the industry in a way that you just never would have imagined that people could do. And so I think it mirrored my work as a culture worker in a uniquely placed way, where it put youth in this place where they could pursue a job and use these skills and truly see the creative skills of people of color as integral rather than nominal, which in my world usually it's seen as nominal. And so seeing yourself as important and your value as important, your voice is important, and especially in a place like the animation industry, I think was really important. And so that's really why I fell into TAP and sort of the things that I think are really cool about TAP.
Right, fantastic, absolutely. It's centering that experience, and I love how it dovetails with everything that you do as a ceramicist. The idea of what you said of sculpting this role, and this idea of modeling, and centering BIPOC experiences, and that being the modeling, not something adjacent. So fantastic. And I have a number of other questions for you, but maybe it's a natural segue to you, Masuma, and really telling us about your experience on the flip side as being a recent intern there, and tell us about sort of stepping into TAP, what you learned there, what your experience has been like.
Yeah, sure. So I was a recent graduate who was really lost and unsure of what the future hold, as I graduated within the recession, and I wasn't really equipped with the arsenal of guidance or resources. So when I applied to TAP, just like anyone else, I was really grateful that TAP saw the potential within me to hone my skills, not only hone and improve upon my skills, but also give me a chance to see what it was like to work within an animation studio. And despite being remote, we were able to create such a welcoming and enthusiastic community alongside with my peers and supervisors. And I'm more than happy to, grow upon my skills outside of TAP, since we're almost graduating from there, unfortunately. And yeah, and, see where life takes me afterwards.
Fantastic. So tell us just a little bit more, if maybe if both of you want to just elaborate on the kinds of skill development that you do, and the kind of partnerships that you do, and any kind of modeling in terms of other folks, other companies or organizations coming into the spaces as well, or virtual spaces.
Sure, absolutely. Masuma, do you want to speak a little bit to the skills that you've been learning and things that you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So there's two cohorts that teach 3D modeling and animation, character animation, and there's another cohort that teaches lighting. So each person within the program can have a little taste of what it's like to do either skill. So it really gave us a chance to, try other things and try to find out what our, passion is. And that really helped to give us a taste of what it's like outside in the real studio workforce.
Nice. So that sense of experimentation, being able to dip into different things.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Nala, maybe if you could tell us a bit about the kind of partnerships and also, importantly, the kind of funding and support and looking for different ways to make this important nonprofit work happen as we share the same space and know how challenging it can be, to just get that funding out there to do this good work.
Absolutely. A lot of our funding and program partners it really is out of building relationships. I think we really build through solid partnerships through solid programming. Usually people see the work that we're doing and the stories of our participants, because all of those stories are accessible, on our social media and YouTube, things like that. And we do screenings. And so having the professionalism of the graduates like Masuma and the scalability of TAP, I think they sort of want to fund our work. They see the outcomes that are actually coming out of the work. So we welcome more partners and are always seeking new funding, because there's always an overwhelming need for requests of our programs. We're constantly building, right? We started with only dealing with, up to like 400 participants in a year to now over 1,400 in a year. It's a lot. It's really grown, especially now being in a virtual space and seeing the ability to broaden even how our reach is being seen, right? And so I think when it comes to our current funding partnerships, we currently have our main partner, the New York City Department of Probation, and MOM, Pinkerton. We also have New York Community Trust, Eckstein Family Trust, Lily I can never say it, Aklanos, and many other foundations. And so we have a lot of corporate funding partnerships as well, like Take Two Interactive, and also private support from like individuals, including donations like from Disney and Fox. And so taking a lot of our New York-based service organizations and then taking our longest standing partnerships with like the New York City Department of Probation and the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, those relationships sort of have allowed us to grow and grow and grow. And so in doing that, I feel like the relationships that we have also allows us to create relationships with other studios as well. So being a place that is also a studio, we take the opportunity to connect with other studios as well. And so those studios include things like Blue Sky Studios, Nickelodeon, HBO, Sony DreamWorks, The Mill. The list goes on for a while. And so I think a lot of our development is just really done through that community outreach and that relationship building.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's really impressive, the range of, foundations, individual supporters, and just also those connections that come through that, corporate industry support as well, in addition to that important funding, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to make sure that we have time to invite everybody back so that we can get questions to you all. I know that we have a tight time frame in terms of some of our panelists. So welcome everybody to hop on back. If we could ask Yalda, Marie, and Masuma to join us again. And I am going to start to look at questions from you all out there. So let's see. All right. Ooh, this is a really good question from one of our audience members. For all panelists, what has been the most unexpected source of funding? That's an intriguing question. Maybe, and I like the smiles here, maybe we'll start with you, Nala.
I have no idea. I'm not sure what.
You're not necessarily on that end as much.
I am in development, but I definitely don't know what would be considered the most surprising. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think all of it's surprising in a way. You never know who's going to give you money and support you. And I think especially with nonprofits, I think it's like a hard thing to get funding. And so whenever you get funding, I think it's an exciting moment for us because we really do depend on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, it's been really exciting at NYICFF to have somebody come in and really support based on our programming. You know, we had someone that saw one of our girls POV programs and just sort of out of the blue kind of committed and said, you know, yes, I want to see more of this. So that's always like a great surprise. So maybe Marie, is there, you know, you had such a great wide range of support. Is there something in there that really was a pleasant surprise for you?
Yes, for sure, because we're always trying to find ways to continue fundraising for our organization, from like having a gala, you know, and having our community, because all of our events are free. So having that one day where everyone can, you know, show their appreciation. However, I think the most unexpected was we were, Cinema Sala was asked to consult on a project with CineReach. And we did. We're just like, we're trying to, you know, we're consulting and trying to help out with this one project. And we were just telling them what we were doing. And then the person we were talking to was just like, have you applied to CineReach for a grant? And we were like, no. And then she's like, do it. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get one. And then we did. And then we did get it. So that was our fundraise. Like, that's our grant for this year. And it was something wherein, you know, we were just, you know, just doing community outreach. We were asked, we just always say yes to any opportunity to help anybody else with no strings attached. And luckily the universe just gives us, you know, unexpected gifts.
Amazing. It's so good to be fueled by the universe. It's so good to have Earth supporting you. Great. And then Yalda, I know that your time is tight, so I'd love to hear from you about unexpected funders or partners.
You know, I think we didn't really think industry would fund us in the beginning. And it's really been surprising that the work we do, you know, we actually get incoming calls from industry a lot. So
Amazing.
that has been very surprising. We haven't had some, you know, like person go, oh, we love your work, we'll write you $1 million check. That's never happened. Waiting for that. We also have gotten like government coming to us, you know, and asking us to partner with them to,
interesting.
You know, reach youth, you know, and people like that. So that's been pretty surprising. I don't know how people find us.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you know, it's so great also to be kind of joining forces in these sort of, you know, building communities amongst ourselves and kind of telegraphing the word from one to another. So
yes, that's true.
I think that's important. All right, let's see. Another question, very important. How do you present a potential project to funders effectively? What's the ideal time in a project's lifespan to apply for grants? Yalda, maybe I'll ask you because I know you need to sign off shortly. If you have thoughts on that.
I mean, I think the further, and I'm speaking from a very traditional, you know, making content for big studios perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, for very mainstream audiences, the furthest along possible, you know, having a script, having even a piece of talent attached if possible. That's the best time. In terms of grant funding, I don't actually know about that. That could be a lot different. But if you wanted to go to a studio or a funder, you know, any kind of, even a streamer or people like that, the furthest along that it can be is the best. And that'll give you more leverage too, because if they want it, you know, you might be able to get other people to want it, and then you can get more money and may have a bigger budget.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. And if anybody else wants to join in on that, otherwise I'll go to the next question. Let's see, I have one more for you actually, Yalda, before you sign off. Dr. Uhls, how should creators approach the industry with projects that focus on topics that haven't traditionally been researched or represented?
I mean, I think it's a really good time to do that. I think, you know, I think content creators are realizing that, or studios and companies are realizing that There's markets for voices that haven't traditionally been represented, like neurodiversity, differently abled, MENA audiences, Asian representation's huge now, AAPI. So I think, you know, just demonstrating there's a market, demonstrating, you know, for example, it hasn't really actually, but come to pass, but Latinx audiences, they watch way more media than white audiences.
Yeah, we're a big
So
box office.
yeah, and they, so if someone knows how to harness that incredibly strong consumer power, same thing with Black audiences, you know, and I think that's why the McKinsey report said there was so much money on the table, because they consume way more media, all kinds of media. So if there's something you know about your particular culture and your particular, or if you know, like some kind of, when I was a producer, I bought a script, MGM bought it for me, about stepping up, which is a dance in the Black culture and a way of dance. And it was like this subculture kind of cool thing that I could pitch. And I partnered with someone else who knew that culture very well, that I could pitch to the studio and say, this is really happening within this group, you know, and you don't know about it yet, but it's going to explode. And, you know, and the people that know about this will come to see it. So sort of turning what you think might be a disadvantage to an advantage. I think that's a really good thing right now. And especially if you go to, like, there are people that look for niche content, you know, so if if you're going to go, there's certain studios that only want that 4 quadrant. When you appeal to everybody, that's the superhero movies, those really big budget things. But if you're, doing something for 5 to 20 million, there are a lot of different places to go now. And especially for kids content. And I just want to say one more thing about kids content.
Yeah,
we're
please.
trying to determine the marketplace. And I don't know if you have, but our initial numbers, because everyone's doing kids, as you know, everybody. If you think about it, Disney, 95% of their business is kids and family. 95% of their business. How much is that? Billions and billions. Netflix, 40% probably of their business. Amazon's going into it. Kids watch this stuff. They have dedicated channels. So, I really am on a mission too, to sort of turn around the perception that the kids business is an afterthought. It's leading the consumer demand due to streaming, really, because kids sit in front of screens for a really long time and watch things over and over again, is really, really huge. So there are a lot of places to go, and there's a lot of money in that business. I told my husband, who's a screenwriter, so what you're saying to me is I should start writing kids stuff.
Yeah. And that's a great way to, thank you. That's a great segue to our next question, which is really interesting. The kids are a huge part of the commercial marketplace. Of course, we are advocating for, thoughtful, unique, diverse storytelling that doesn't always get greenlit by the big studios. Certainly things are moving a lot more forward in a more thoughtful direction, which is really exciting. But this kind of crosses over perhaps between the work that you're doing, Marie and Nala, into the, how it converges with the thought of like an arts education space with a more unique sort of artistic approach to storytelling and thinking about kids as an audience. So this question is, any stories about how you've successfully argued for the seriousness of children's media to a traditional arts funder? Because it's always that challenge, right? Of like, how do you fit your story into a funder that's kind of in that space, but not, it's not a dead-on fit. So Marie or Nala, if you want to speak a little bit to that.
Nala, would you like to lead that one? I'm still thinking.
I know it is a tough one. I think it's, really like, how do you advocate for, kids and young people, and I mean kids broadly too, the sort of next generation that you're working with, Nala, being taken seriously in terms of the content that's directed at them, but also the content that they can create.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, and especially at the animation project, I think really leading with the duality of the animation project is something that has definitely been useful for me in regards to thinking about youth. And I say that because the idea of being able to pitch the idea of feeling uncertain in yourself is something that all kids can relate to, but also something that adults can relate to, right? And so I think that when I am working in that space, it feels like it gives you that position to sort of think about how is it that we fit into certain spaces? How do we transform certain spaces and be in different sectors? And so when it comes to talking to people about children in the media, I think that we usually at the animation project, it is guided towards their storytelling. What are they saying about their narratives? And it sounds bad, but in a way, really pulling at the heartstrings of why we do the work that we're doing, right? We're not just doing it so that people have jobs, but we're having it so that people live successful and full lives, right? No one wants to go to work and be unhappy. And so when it comes to thinking about ourselves, I think as adults and thinking about ourselves as youth, you then realize why you would want to fund someone like that. How can you make someone else's experience different than how your experience was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Marie, maybe in that respect, what you were talking about in terms of wanting to see those stories for kids that you shape. Is there a little like pull quote for you in terms of how you've been pitching those projects that you have to this?
I think though, because like Nala covered a lot of it, but the thing I wanted to add too is, and based from experience being a mom, is that this age of children is like the most important. They're really a sponge, and I don't talk down to my child because she is super smart, and it kind of baffles me how smart she is. And so I just want to be able to catch up and be able to provide for her so that I can maximize her full potential. And I'm sure that there are millions of children just like this, and just like finding a toy that your child responds to and that they can go back to, and it gives them something, it expands their mind and imagination. I kind of want to do that with content. Like it's something that it says a certain age for it, but in reality the content we create, it's for parents to watch with their children. At the same time, it's for children to be able to be their full potential, and at the same time see themselves where they don't usually do it. Because I do see my daughter when she sees, like, I put on Cars for her, and obviously it's usually catered for young little boys, and so she was just like not into it. But when I showed her, let's say, Over the Moon with a young Asian girl, like her face was just like, and I could see that with my own two eyes, that reflection, and that's something that I never experienced as a child. Watching content from the Philippines, I never got to see necessarily myself in any Hollywood movie or anything. So I do see how special that is, because it opens a window into her power, her possibility, and potential.
Fantastic, absolutely. All right, I'm going to close with one last question, which I think is really germane to all of us in the nonprofit space and in the indie space, and how challenging it can be. Question from the audience: how do you avoid feelings of burnout when it seems like you're hitting a wall? How do you take care of yourself with work? Which I think is a really interesting way of kind of wrapping that question. Yalda,
I have to jump, so I'm going to jump.
One last thing and then jump. Oh, you need to unmute.
I think that you just have to remind yourself that it's not rocket science in a way. Like I think when and you have to celebrate the small wins, and just you have to take time off and go out into the world, because that's where you're going to get new ideas and refresh yourself. So you need to do it to do good work, but just celebrate the small wins and be persistent and stick with it. My husband was a successful screenwriter, and it took him 10 years before he got to the point where he made a decent living. And I do think it takes that long. Most people, it takes that long to really get to the point where they understand what they're doing and the craft. So don't give up if this is really, really what you want to do. And look at me, I've reinvented myself 3 times in my career. So you can do it. You can do other things too. So know
And
that.
3 very successful reinventions. Thank you so much for being with us,
Okay.
Yalda. We'll let you
Thank
go,
you so
but
much.
check out the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, and thank you. And we're
Thank
excited
you.
to talk to you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, Marie, do you have getting over burnout advice?
Yes, this is very poignant for me right now because I was just telling my husband how I felt burned out.
Yeah, I bet. We're
And
feeling it.
I do feel that the reason for feeling burnout is when you don't give yourself a break. If you just go from one thing to another thing to another thing,
Mhm.
and then when weekends are not weekends, because I think that when you hold weekends sacred and you give yourself time to treat yourself, if watching something makes you happy, do it. For me, it's cooking, like cooking a good meal. So sometimes I'll go to the grocery store and spend a couple extra dollars on something that really would make me happy. Right now, it's making Filipino food, like comfort food. So we went to a Filipino grocery, and you should have seen the smile on my face.
Nice.
Like I was just like at the thing, and I was just getting ingredients
Yeah.
I can't usually get.
Yeah.
And it's just these little, as Dr. Yalda said, it was about these little wins. It's not about career wins, it's about personal wins, because we're a fountain, and if we don't put in something that nourishes us spiritually and emotionally, personally, we'll dry up, I feel. And so I sometimes watch a trashy TV show to make me happy, make myself a good meal, and of course, number one, sleep. Sleep is very, very important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Marie. All right, Masuma, how about you? As the younger generation, what do you do to refuel and sort of get over things when you've hit a wall?
Well, I'm currently going through that right now, the burnout.
Yeah.
And
you're in a lot of good company.
Yeah. So this pandemic and everything going on hasn't really assisted with that as well. So I guess what really helped is the advocacy for mental health, not only for yourself, but holding the companies and industry accountable, because when you make your passion into a career, and it really like makes it different than when it was just a hobby for you. So that boundary to like what everyone else pointed out was rest and not making your weekends into a work day, and just a better understanding of what it means to like take care of yourself and holding yourself in a good space, instead of like making your life work into an everyday thing, because there's more to life than just your passions, and you have to be passionate about other things in order to like make everything cohesive and everything turn out well and work for each other.
Yeah, very well put. Thank you, Masuma. All right, Nala, you get to close it out. You have some amazing advice for all of us?
Of course. No, I'm just joking. Sure. I think burnout's so real. And I definitely think that's why me as a creative arts therapist, that's why I'm at TAP, right? The idea of considering your personal self when you are in the workforce. And I think for me, especially thinking about inequity, specifically racial inequity in the workforce, and especially with children, I think when the scope of the fight feels overwhelming, it sometimes seems impossible to take a break. But I think you usually feel like you're wrong for taking a break, right? Because the fight's huge and we're always fighting. But I think we can't do the work if we're depleted, And so I think for me, it's practicing self-compassion. And I think that can go a long way when it comes to burnout. Just being compassionate to yourself, realizing that you can't do it all in one day.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. I'm so grateful to you all. We have so many wonderful fruits for thought and takeaways, and it's been so inspiring. And I know our audience has many more questions. I'm sorry we can get to them all, but we will be sharing this collection of videos out as recordings. We're going to wrap everything up, email it to all of our followers throughout the panels, and you can share it with your friends. Check out our website. It's been an amazing industry forum, and we're so grateful to you all for being here. Thank you so much. Nala, Masuma, Marie, fantastic. Thank you everybody for being there. We have this amazing international audience, and it's just been so great. So we're really grateful at NYICFF. We're really excited to support a community, to support new generations. So thank you all again. Good night. Have a great, summer. Recharge, refresh, do some amazing work, and reach out to each other and support one another. Thank you. Good night.